So, welcome back to another Byte Wellness Wednesday. We've got all these new faces. This is amazing. We start these meetings with a review of our discussion questions. So, some of you found us because you're on the daily wellness text thread. So, you're getting a text message every day, and that includes a little bit of a curriculum and prompt prompting questions that try to get you to dig down deep, try to understand the triggers behind your habits, and really hack into some of the weird mindsets that we have around wellness, some of the things that might be keeping us stuck where we are instead of allowing us to move forward towards our wellness goals. So if you're on the text thread, then you will have gotten the question that we highlighted here. You will have gotten that um, on Sunday, which is when those go out. And if you're not on the text thread, this is an opportunity to join. You would just send to our phone number, send a text to our number 1-224-302-6224, send the word text, TEXT, and that'll help get you on so that you'll get, even after March, you'll continue to get invites to these weekly sessions, and then you'll get the daily text lessons that, trust me, guys, there's a lot of gold in there. These are gems. So we're going to start with the discussion questions. The first one is, well, it's this last one here. It's the last one of the month. So what are the wellness habits that you practice automatically without even thinking about them? Like, you know how you wash your hands before you leave the bathroom, and you don't really have to remind yourself to do that, or you brush your teeth in the morning or before bed, and you don't have to remind yourself. Do you all have any of these wellness habits? Any others you can think of that just happen for you? Can anybody?
I don't know if it's a wellness habit per se,
Mhm.
um, but it's this idea that if you have to walk to however many floors, always take the stairs.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That counts as a habit. Movement is one of our wellness practices, right? So, exactly. If you kind of set up a rule for yourself that eventually becomes automatic, just kind of gets triggered subconsciously, and your rule is whenever I come to an elevator, I'm going to look around for some stairs and I'm taking those stairs. That's an automatic habit. Can anyone else think of any that they have? If not, I'll give you one. I
I
see
didn't
Claire.
I didn't think about it that way when you were saying. I was thinking of something more, but it's the same. When I go into a parking lot, I just take the first park I see and walk. And as opposed to like asking my children to go downstairs to get something for me, I make myself, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go do it myself. So at least I'm moving. Um it,
Yes.
while like it doesn't, it's not hard, it's just easier to say, hey, go get so and so for me. So parking
Exactly.
and the stair thing, I do that one too.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you for sharing, Claire. I mean, look, you guys are going to see there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of like science of behavior change that goes into these conversations. But a lot of the things we're talking about are really just common sense. And you might not have really thought about these different ways of tricking your brain or tricking your body into doing what you want them to do. But that's why we're having this conversation and we're just laying it all out. So, as Miss Bridget, as Miss Claire said, um, ways to get yourself to move more would be, instead of having other people do it, anytime you need something, right? You go get it. Or make yourself walk farther distances in the parking lot. Just don't even give yourself the option of trying to drive around and get the parking spot that's closest to wherever you're going. So I've got an example. A few years ago, I started making more of a concerted effort. Like, as I started learning all these things I'm telling you guys, I made more of a concerted effort um, to include vegetables in my meals, right? Not as a side, but as the equivalent of an entree, if not actually the main dish. And so my automatic habit now is that if I have not cooked a large vat of veggies with dinner, for example, or with lunch, then I just make a salad. It's just the rule. There is a big salad with every meal, unless the meal is itself all vegetables. And to make that really easy, we'll talk in a second about how important it is to make some of these habits easy to maintain. To make it easy, I get the pre-washed, pre-packaged baby spinach and arugula in a bag. I don't have to do all the extra work of washing it, etc. Um, and so I can just grab the handfuls, put the greens in a bowl, add whatever like minimally processed dressing that I have in the fridge. Either I've made it or I've bought it, and we can talk about what some of those recommendations are. And then you've got a giant salad, and that's part of your meal, ideally making up at least 50% of your plate. So, really great examples, guys. And the reason why we're talking about why why it's important for habits to become automatic, and whether you have any of those wellness habits that are automatic for you, the reason we're talking about them is that they really fit into our BATS framework for understanding how to build wellness habits. So we kind of switched the order a little bit, and the acronym looks a little bit like SBAT, but this acronym helps us understand the process, the 4 steps of building these wellness habits. So the first thing that we talked about is scheduling protected time to practice. If you're trying to exercise more, if you're trying to cook more veggie heavy meals, you need time to actually do it, right? And it takes a surprising amount of energy to shift your habits. So you really do need to set aside time to focus. The B in that stands for minimizing your barriers, right? So first, identifying your barriers, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago now. Identifying your barriers and then figuring out how to make them as small as possible so that the things keeping you from doing your activity shrink way down, and the things that make it easy for you to do your activity, they raise way up. So we want that balance to be your assets, the A in BATS, far outweigh your barriers. And that gives you a better shot at being able to practice this new wellness activity on a regular basis, be consistent enough to actually build a habit. And then the last step of these 4 is triggers, right? So we're talking about how to automate your behavior using triggers. And here's why this gets really important. Has anybody heard of Pavlov's dogs? That classical conditioning experiment. I see Miss Bridget nodding, and I see Miss Claire nodding, and so other folks might also be aware, but I'm going to run through this for a second because this took place way back in the early 20th century. And great, Lisa says, yes, she's heard of Pavlov's dogs. Thank you for adding that, Lisa. And it really lays the groundwork for understanding how we need to essentially trick our brains in order to build these new habits, so that instead of kind of killing ourselves and guilting ourselves and relying on sheer force of will to eat better or move more, we really are able to just set up our environment in ways that makes it pretty simple. And if you do it right, you look back at a time when you weren't exercising regularly, or you weren't eating all these veggies, or you were eating more sugar than you wanted to. You look back at that time and you're like, what was I even doing? It's so easy to maintain this shift, or to maintain these new habits once I've built them, that you almost forget what it took to get there, right? So that's our ideal. Okay, so here's the background of Pavlov's dogs, for anybody who needs a refresher. So there's this Russian physiologist, last name Pavlov, and he's a physiologist. So he's not studying psychology, but he's studying dogs' digestive systems. And his main research question was, well, how much do dogs salivate and when? Like, what causes them to build up saliva in their mouths? And in order to test that, he collected saliva that dogs created, um, in response to a bunch of different triggers. So basically, when you gave them food, how much saliva did they create? When you gave them an object that isn't edible, how much saliva did they create? And what he started to notice is, you know what? Dogs release lots of saliva, and I'm going to blow up this picture so you guys can see it here. The words are less important, the images are more important here. They release lots of saliva when they see food and smell food. And that's obvious. It's a physiologic reflex, it's automatic. Dogs aren't in control of that. It just happens, like evolutionary, right? But then he noticed that the dog started to salivate just when the research assistant walked up to the room where the dogs were held, whether there was food or not. Just it seemed like the sound of the footsteps maybe caused the dogs to salivate. And so he started to wonder if maybe he had made this other discovery about how dogs' brains work and how learning happens. And so he started substituting the footsteps, or replacing the footsteps with a bell. And so on the screen here, you can see, all right, dogs get meat, they get food, and they start to salivate. And then if they hear a bell, that means essentially nothing to them, right? And so there's no response. But when you pair the bell with the food, then eventually the dogs start to learn bell equals food. Bell means I'm getting fed. And this response that was, it's physiologic, it's not controllable by the dogs at least. This response of salivating is now tied to the bell. So we trick the dogs into thinking that the bell is the equivalent of food. And now, whenever you ring the bell, the dogs salivate, whether there's food or not, right? And so that's the principle that we are playing on when we use triggers to automate our habits. Does that make sense to everyone, or do you have any questions about that? I'm opening up our chat here. Okay. I see Lisa J says, I like that. And you also commented, thank you, Lisa J, for contributing. You commented that drinking water in the morning is one of your automatic habits. And so that's an excellent addition to our collection of automatic habits. Okay, so I don't see anyone commenting on the Pavlov's dog example. So I think that means that you probably get it, right? Now, let's just bring that back down to earth. Good. I see some thumbs raised. Thank you. Bring it back down to our specific experience. So, if you guys have been on the text thread, or if you've been to any of these previous workshops, we talk a lot about hacking habits. And one of the researchers that we quote is named BJ Fogg. He's this guy that does research on behavioral psychology out at Stanford in California. And he came up with this model that he calls the Fogg behavioral model. And it's represented here in this graph. There are a lot of words here, so I'm going to kind of explain it. But the deal is that there's a thing he calls prompts That's what we've been calling triggers. And it's possible for these prompts or triggers to trigger a behavior, to trigger a new habit, right? But there is this really kind of perfect set of circumstances required for a trigger to work. And so basically, motivation is on one side. You're interested in how motivated you are, and you're interested in how easy it is to do the thing you're trying to do. And so just think about it. If you are super duper motivated, all the way up here at the top of the graph, if you can move mountains with your willpower, then maybe you can achieve your goal. Okay. If you can move mountains and your goal is super easy to do, like you don't need to move mountains, you're moving a stack of pennies, really, is your goal. All right, then you're even more likely, you're all the way here in the top right, and you're even more likely to achieve it. But if you've got really low motivation, you don't have a ton of willpower, then your goal really needs to be easy to do. You want to be on this right side of the green action line. So you either have high motivation to move mountains, or you've got a thing that's just super easy to do. And so your motivation doesn't matter that much. Now, when you are on the right side of this green line is when triggers really work for you, right? So if we take this back to Pavlov's dogs, the trigger of the bell, it triggers salivation, partly because salivation is easy for the dogs to do. It's not actually a conscious behavior. That's why this question for us in changing habits, this question starts to involve our ability to do it, right? And the ease of doing it. So can you guys give me an example of like what's a habit that you've tried to build or that you successfully built that either requires a lot of willpower or is very easy to do? Any examples of that for me?
I have a lot of willpower for this particular one sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but getting up every morning at 5 o'clock to do my workout. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
going on vacation, I have more motivation. But so what I've done is like push myself to do it. So my willpower is what makes me actually get up to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're saying I'm getting up to exercise at this, I don't know, maybe ungodly hour for you.
Yes.
And because I am so motivated, I have this incredible willpower. But let me ask you, Claire, what happens when you have those days, you're in a bad mood, you're super overwhelmed, you haven't gotten enough sleep, you're feeling sick? Can you still wake up and work out at 5 a.m.?
So that depends on if I have another goal. So if it's like a day where I'm like, okay, I'm not in the mood, but I know in August I'm going to Jamaica. I'm like, I'm getting up regardless. If I'm not going to Jamaica in August, then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just do the replay later today if I feel better later. But yeah,
There you
it's
go.
tough, but I've been pushing.
Yes. Well, first of all, congratulations on pushing. Because look, getting up at 5 a.m., working out first thing in the morning at that hour before the sun is up, much less during this season, is laudable. So good for you. It also shows that you're super motivated to invest in yourself. And so this is excellent. Now, what you illustrated for us is that willpower can go a really long way,
Mhm.
but sometimes it has its failures, right?
Yes.
Particularly, if we go back to our graph, when even with really high willpower, if it gets hard to do the exercise, willpower is high, but it's hard to get up and do it because you've got a lot on your plate, you haven't slept, all those things we talked about, right?
Mhm.
Then your chances of getting up at 5 and doing the workout go way down. You end up on this left side of the green line where
Mhm.
the triggers just don't work so well. So you might have an alarm, it goes off at 5, you know you got to get up and work out, but the trigger doesn't work for you. So one of the best ways for us to build these habits, which are just repeated behaviors that become almost automatic, right? One of the best ways to build the habits reliably is to try to live on this right side of the graph where we make the activity as easy as possible. Now, sometimes our life circumstances keep us from being able to make the shifts that make the activity possible. Like if you've got kids running around, maybe 5 a.m. is the best possible time for you to work out before all the other demands of family life and work life pile down on you. Okay, then that's what we're working with. Um, Making that activity as easy as possible might mean uh, finding a way to work out in the home, close to home, laying out your workout clothes beforehand,
Mhm.
making it as enjoyable as possible with your, a playlist you put together with songs you just can't wait to listen to. And so, and you're shaking your head. I know we've had a conversation before, and you're super resourceful. So I bet that you've done a lot of those things already.
Yes.
But just to give everybody a picture, that's really what we're talking about when we're saying, so how do you get to this easy side of the graph? What can you do to make things a little bit easier? So maybe even on the days when your willpower doesn't cut it, you can still get over to the right side of the graph and you can still achieve your goals. Does anyone else
Okay.
have examples like that you want to share? Um, One example for me, I'll just go back to the one I shared earlier, is what I told you about just adding the salad to every meal. Um, it's not ideal to have to buy pre-washed veggies. I'm paying a little bit extra to have them pre-washed and bagged. But I also know that it's important for me to make it as easy as possible to just throw that salad in the bowl in order for it to happen. Because if I have to go through and wash the kale myself after cooking dinner at the end of a long day, that might be the thing that keeps it from happening. So, trying to make it as easy as possible, whatever your goal is, whatever that specific activity is. All right. Anybody else want to add? If not, we will move on to talking about how to trigger those practices. So just keep in mind that framework we talked about where there's like a balance between motivation and ease of activity, and how you want to be as much as possible doing an activity that feels as easy as possible or is as easy to get to as possible, because that's the place where your triggers make a difference. If you are that dog salivating, you want to hear the bell. You want to set up triggers in your life that will be the bell to get you to do that behavior. So we use this framework called Apple, and that breaks down into all these different ways to think about how to build triggers into our lives. Really simple trigger. First one is just an alarm on your phone, on your watch, goes off. This works really well if you are doing the same thing every day at the exact same time. Alarm goes off every day at the exact same time, okay? But sometimes our schedules aren't that simple. And sometimes these habits of ours aren't that simple. Maybe you're not doing it every day. Maybe you're not doing it at the same time every day. So you might think about linking the activity to people. Maybe you have an accountability partner you work out with. And when you see that partner, that's when you get, that's your trigger. Okay, it's workout time. Maybe you have somebody that you cook new meals with, or somebody who pushes you to eat more vegetables, and that's a trigger, right? Place is the PL in Apple. And so there might be locations that trigger habits. So maybe you go to the gym every time you leave work, right? Um, or before you leave work. Maybe you've got workout equipment at the gym. Maybe when you come home is when you know that you're going to do a quick walk around the block or a walk around your home. Or when you come home is when you know that you're going to drink that green smoothie to get in more veggies, right? All these creative ways to think about building in triggers. The last type of trigger in our Apple framework is events. And that's what Claire described when she said, when I wake up at 5 a.m., I work out. So that can kind of qualify as, the alarm category, as well as the events category, because I'm going to tell you, I also exercise every morning when I wake up, or that's my goal at least. Let me be honest, it doesn't always happen. This is a safe space, right? So, but I'm not necessarily waking up at the same time every day. So instead of setting an alarm every single morning, every single day at 5 a.m., I'm going to work out. Some days it's going to be later, some days it's going to be earlier, but it's tied to the event of getting out of bed. Whenever I get out of bed, I have a bunch of floor and body weight exercises that I do in my house because I'm in Chicago and it's freezing, and I'm honest with myself. I'm not going to go outside and go to the gym. I'm just not. So I've found a way to make it work at home, found a way to make it as easy as possible, and also tie it to an event, which is my trigger. So I want to go through these, how each of these pieces of the Apple framework can be used with our big four wellness practices: eating, movement, sleep, and stress management. But again, this is meant to be interactive. So you all let me know, are there specific wellness goals that you're working towards? And we can emphasize those while we talk. You can come on camera or audio or write it in the chat, however you like.
For me, it's movement and sleep. So
Movement
that's
and
what I'm
sleep.
really
Moving
working on.
more. Okay. Moving more. Sleeping more. Is that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Movement and sleep. Movement's a really big one. That's been a big issue for me. Lisa J says same. Okay, movement and sleep. Thank you. We heard from Claire that movement is something she's been working on, so that's great. And then anyone else wants to add, feel free. I'll just keep checking this chat, okay?
Yeah, all
So,
right.
oh, who said that?
Oh, that was Linda. For me, it's best
Oh,
basically trying to actually get out of the bed and do some type of exercise and to sleep. So it would be just to have that motivation to get out of the bed and then to sleep, to make it through the night with that sleep.
okay. Okay. So we're seeing some themes here. Movement and sleep are really big issues for all of us. Thank you for sharing, Linda. So, let's talk then about how alarms can be useful for movement. Have any of you all tried setting alarms? to exercise on a regular basis or move on a regular basis? I see some heads
Yes.
nodding, and Claire just told us that she does, right? So we know that. And I see Miss Bridget is nodding her head, and Miss Linda as well. Would you like to share, Miss Linda, your experience with alarms for either movement or sleep?
Well, I set the alarms, and then I hit a snooze button, and then I hit it again and again and again and again until it's actually until that time frame for me to actually exercise has gone on, and then it's actually time for me to get up about my day. So I need something more. So the alarms are not really doing it for me unless maybe my other thought process was to set the alarm and then actually have to get out of the bed to turn it off.
Oh, that's really smart. I like that. Is that something you've tried so far or not
That's,
yet?
that's just my thought process at this moment. I have not actually put it into, but I think that will work, for me, just not to have it
Yeah.
so close, and just get up and do it. So that's my next goal, is to move the alarm and to actually get up and have to turn it off. And once I'm up, then I can
Yes.
go ahead and start exercising.
Yes. Well, you know what? That sounds really smart. Claire mentions great idea. Thanks. I'm going to try that. Yeah. I mean, look, if your goal is to, so we can go back to this chart, but if your goal is to not hit snooze, then if you move the alarm clock farther away, or the phone or whatever is your alarm farther away, so you actually have to get up to hit snooze, what you're doing is you're actually leveraging this same principle. You're saying, remember, we said if you want to do a thing, try to make it as easy to do as possible. But if you turn that on its head for all of the behaviors we're trying to cut back on, make it as hard to do that thing as possible. So I'm going to have to get out of bed, or I will hear this dadgum alarm going off over and over again. I have no choice. The other thing I want to suggest or ask Miss Linda is whether you've tried exercising at a different time in the day, because it sounds, based on what you've said, like it's actually just really, really hard for you to get up in the morning. And I know that you said that sleep is an issue, and that just getting through the night and getting enough sleep, it sounds like, or quality sleep is enough. So I wonder if right now, um, getting up and active in the mornings might be too tall a task if your brain is saying, nah, now we need more rest. Have you tried another time in the day?
Yes, I do much better, in the evening times. But what I was finding was that, if I'm not on the schedule, normally when I was in Atlanta, I had a partner that we used to work out, I mean, consistently, boot camp. But now, um, in Texas, I find myself working out in the evenings, but then if something come up, I happen to miss that workout. So I knew that, I felt like nothing would really come up in the morning, which is why I was trying to rotate to the morning schedule. But I really do much better on the evening schedule.
Yeah. So that's really astute of you. I mean, that works. That morning works for a lot of people. Claire mentioned how it works for her. I mentioned that I tie the first movement of the day to waking up, just for that very reason you said. Like, if I wait later in the day, things pile up, things come up, you get invited to things, you have to put out fires, there's more work. And then before you know it, it's time for bed and you haven't worked out. So I totally get the thought process of tacking the workout on to the morning. And so it sounds like for you, maybe your task is to figure out what truly works best for you, because you're kind of dealing with the difficulty of getting started with the workout and getting started with the day in the beginning of the day versus the challenge of distraction later in the day, even though you generally feel better working out later. So then the other question is there something, is there one of these, if alarm doesn't work for you for exercising in the evening, I wonder if we can go down the list. You had a person who was your trigger because that was your accountability partner. You did boot camps together. I wonder if there's a place or an event that you can connect to working out that you think is going to be kind of safe or protected. Nothing can interfere with that time. Does that exist for you in the evening, perhaps, or later in the day? And
I am. Nothing comes to mind at this moment, but that's something that I'm going to have to take a look at.
yeah, yeah. This is an ongoing process. It takes a while. It can take a while to troubleshoot these issues. And believe it or not, like this is the hard part actually, is figuring out how to put yourself in the best position to do this thing, right? To do the exercise on a regular basis and then just having the discipline to do it. But you want to just find what is the easiest way for me to do this. Not the scenario where I have like all these challenges and every pretty good reason in the world not to do it. Okay, so we've talked about how to use an alarm to help us exercise. And then, oh, and you know what, Miss Linda, I've got one more suggestion for you and for anyone else here. One of the things that we're learning more about as a scientific and medical community is this thing called exercise snacks. So there's this possibility of getting quite a lot of benefit out of breaking up your exercise into these little bites, right? So if you were planning to do an hour-long workout either in the morning or in the evening, but things always come up in the evening, then consider finding 4 15-minute chunks throughout the day to do a workout, or maybe 2 30-minute chunks, right? Or if 30 minutes was your planned workout time, then maybe you break up that time into 3 10-minute chunks or 2 15-minute chunks. You get the drill. So there are all sorts of ways that you can be creative here with the way that you use alarms to trigger movement. All right, and then sleep, because that was the second activity that came up quite a bit for us. So using an alarm to trigger sleep is actually, it seems like it would be straightforward, right? Has anyone tried that? Where you give your kids a bedtime and you got a bedtime too. I see some shaking heads no, which is typical because look, as women, you are taking care of everybody. You might be taking care of an older generation, you might be taking care of a younger generation, you have all sorts of things on your plate. And the inclination is to think that you can't rest until you've handled it all, right? But what keeps coming back to us, especially during this pandemic, is that we need rest and that maybe we're not even in a good position to handle all that we're given if we're not getting adequate rest. So this is another one of those troubleshooting tasks where it might take you a few tries and a few weeks to months to figure out, well, what is the right time for me to set this alarm where I can reliably go to sleep? But alarm seems to be pretty useful for sleep once we can get it right. I see Olivia raising her hand. Miss Olivia, yes. Do you have a question or comment?
I have a comment. Good evening, everyone. Just as a little motivation, I find that music will help you move. You can have music on and you're moving around, and all of a sudden you're just like, okay, it's time for a dance break. And you'll be surprised the level of energy that'll come up and how much moving around you'll do. And you can do that in increments throughout the day. It's just a little suggestion.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for adding that. I mean, that's brilliant. You tied in the fact that you can break up big chunks of exercise into little chunks and still get a health benefit from it. You pointed out this thing that we talk about in leveraging wellness assets. You talk about how important it is to enjoy your activity, and dancing even by yourself can be so enjoyable. So
That's
that's
it.
another thing for everybody to consider. Thank you so much.
My
This is
pleasure.
what
And
I'm
Miss
talking
Linda,
about.
and then to Miss Linda, if you need some motivation, I'm always here. And I don't have a hard time because I'm in physical therapy at the current time. So I'm
Uh-huh.
getting my workout in.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, that's our community at work. That's just beautiful, guys. I love to see that. Okay, so we think about alarms for sleep. Let's move on because I want to make sure that you guys get through the the habits that matter for you. And I don't know if Miss Olivia raised her hand again or if it's still raised. If you have something to add, feel free to come on mic or add to the chat. I'll keep going otherwise. So in our Apple framework, people is the second P, and Miss Linda gave us an example of how that can work with movement, where maybe you have an accountability partner for your workouts, and maybe that is the main time you actually see this person. So you see them and you think, all right, time to work out. Um, One of my accountability partners, especially early in the pandemic, was my mother. We started doing these Thursday workouts to get us back into moving again. And I don't see her all that often. So that one time a week that I'd see her was at least the majority of our visits. And so I've started associating her face now with a workout. We're going to get down and do some core work. We're going to get down and do some body weight exercises or something. And now we each work out independently on a regular basis, but we still come together on those Thursdays, even virtually now that it's snowing here. We'll still come together on those Thursdays um, to work out. So she's one of my people triggers. Uh, for sleep, the people part gets a little bit more complicated. I think using people as a trigger might even have the opposite effect, because I don't know if you all are anything like me, but since I was a kid, it's been hard to settle down and get to sleep. So sometimes you see a person you like and you want to talk to them, and maybe the last thing you want to do is go to sleep. But for folks who are caregivers, either to children or to an older generation, maybe one way those people can be a trigger is when you tie those people to an event or to a place, i.e., once the kids get to bed, then maybe it's my time to go to bed, right? Once my elder family member is taken care of and down for the night, supported, maybe that's my time to sort of let my brain rest and I can go to bed. Anyone have anything else to add there? Um,
You know what? I think in this climate, I don't know about other people, but sometimes, and I have to admit, I'm an empty nester, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But there's a certain time of day when you're finished with all your work, and then you want, and especially if you put kids to bed, then you feel that you want your time. So
yeah.
sometimes we overdo it, watching Netflix, all the DVR shows we missed. We think, okay, I worked so hard during the day, and what we compromise is our sleep. But we get in this downtime to just chill, And sometimes you get involved in The Walking Dead or whatever it is, and then you just don't go to sleep. And you just stay up way too long. But it's
Yes.
but in your mind, you think I'm chilling and I deserve this because I work so hard, but you're compromising your sleep. And my thing is overworking, just like, oh, I got so much work. I have so much work to do. Oh my God. I'm going to stay up till midnight, but I know I'm getting up at 5 a.m. You know, it's crazy. I have to remind myself, I just have to put it away and I just have to wait till the next day. I, I just have to go to bed. And it is very hard. I don't know about anyone else. It is very hard for me to do that. I try very hard. Even if I set an alarm, I set an alarm to work out every single day, twice a day. I set an alarm. I can do that. I'm motivated. I love music. I have a workout track. I have my Peloton and I have a program. I love it. And I can do that twice a day. I cannot set an alarm to go to sleep. And I need professional help because I can't do it. You know, I know intellectually I should. It is so hard. So I'll go off mic. I don't know about anybody else, but that is my burden right now.
Anybody else want to add to that? That's very relatable. I
Yeah.
totally get it.
Because it's like the time, like, okay, I can't watch the shows I want to when my daughter's awake because they're not appropriate for her. But when I put her in the bed, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch this. And I'll look up, and again, I get up. It's like 4:45 when I'm getting out of the bed to do my 5 o'clock workout. I'll stay up to like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be tired. I'm like, but it's okay. I watched my shows, but then I go through the rest of the day like, oh, you're just tired. And I'm not a nap person even on the weekend, so I just go through my entire life tired currently.
Oh, and that stinks. That's also relatable, Claire. Thank you for adding that because some people are more sleep sensitive than others. I'm one of those sleep sensitive people. It sounds like you might be, meaning if you don't get enough sleep, you're just done for the day, and it just keeps on piling up. So, Ms. Bridget, thank you for adding all that you did. That's real. There are these competing priorities. And we have this with all of our wellness activities. There's like enjoying life, and then there's doing what's good for us. And as much as possible, we try to merge the two, but every once in a while, you come to this impasse where, just like you said, the way that life is set up, taking care of folks, you don't have time to yourself all day until they go to bed, and then you try to get as much time in. So, I mean, I don't have a great solution for that, right? That's something that mothers and caregivers like all over the world have struggled with and continue to. But so the only recommendation is just to try to find that sweet spot. That's the best that we can do, right? Somewhere in between enjoying your life, getting a chance to see some of those shows, but maybe not as many as you would like, and still getting in bed in time to not feel miserable in the morning so that you can be active and available and around for kids, and also prevent the lifestyle related chronic diseases that we have an increased risk of developing if we go through life completely sleep deprived. So everybody has to find wherever their sweet spot is. But then I'll remind you, just sort of as we're wrapping up, in our sleep course, we spent a lot of time troubleshooting sleep. And I think this may have been back in September that we did on the daily wellness text thread. And we reviewed these principles of sleep hygiene. And so you can never go over these enough. There are things that help to train your brain to go to sleep, and then things that play on your physiology and the actual chemicals that your brain senses to go to sleep. So some of these sleep hygiene principles, these are just sleep habits. The hygiene part doesn't actually mean like cleanliness. Some of these principles are trying to avoid devices, backlit devices, so TVs and bright computers and tablets and even phones for an hour or so, at least before bed. And I know how hard that is, especially when that pre-bedtime phase is like the only time you have to really do you and catch up on stuff. But if you can avoid those blue lights right before bed, you give your brain a chance to build up the melatonin that tells your body, oh, time to shut down, time to go to sleep. What these backlit devices do is they suppress the melatonin the same way that the sun does, except they do it to a stronger degree and for a longer period of time. So you end up in this situation where you're tired because you didn't really get much sleep last night and you've been running around all day taking care of everybody else. And then it gets to be bedtime, but watching those devices for extended periods right before bed just might kind of reverse your body's ability to truly relax and get quality sleep. And so it ends up working against us. So we try as much as possible without making our lives feel miserable to try to avoid these devices right before bed. The other consideration is paying attention to when we consume substances. So, like caffeine that will keep us awake can be active, glomming onto those receptors that keep us from falling asleep for even 8 hours before bedtime, right? So, if your bedtime is 10 o'clock, then maybe 2 p.m. is really the last time to try that coffee. And then with alcohol, around 4 to 6 hours before bedtime is the recommended cutoff, which, you know what, is probably surprising to a lot of people. I was pretty surprised when I learned this because we think about nightcaps and like a glass of wine before bed as helping us get to sleep, right? But the reality is that as alcohol is metabolized, about 6 hours after the last drink is when it releases the receptors that have relaxed you and made you go to sleep. And there's a rebound excitation of the brain. And so you're likely to have a sleep disturbance 6 hours after you've had the last drink. So if you take a drink of wine at 9 o'clock to help you get to bed at 10, then almost like clockwork. And if you think back to your history, you might recognize this almost like clockwork. 6 hours after 9, maybe about 3 a.m., 2, 3, 4 a.m., you'll notice that maybe you wake up, maybe you start to become more aware of sounds or lights in the room, and you end up in the morning, even if you've been in bed for 8 to 9 hours, you end up in the morning not necessarily fully rested, unfortunately. So this is another one of those sleep hygiene principles or sleep habits that helps us make sure that we're setting ourselves up to get good quality sleep. Really quickly, what ties into the sleep hygiene principles is this places, which remember is our third category in the Apple framework for triggering wellness practices. And the way that that works is that you want to make sure that your bed specifically is a place where sleep happens and practically nothing else happens. So we're all adults, folks are sexually active. Sex is one of those things that you can have in bed. Things that you don't want to do in bed, read for extended periods of time, watch TV, eat meals, exercise in bed. We would try not to do that because, kind of like our Pavlov's dog example, you want seeing your bed, the sight of your bed, to be a trigger in your brain that says, sleep time. I can let everything go. It's sleep time. So that means that throughout the day, we're not doing work in the bed, as hard as that is. Guys, I do it sometimes too. You have those days. But as much as possible, link the bed as one of those places that will trigger sleep. And then, the last thing, I think we've kind of touched on this throughout our conversation, is tying your wellness practice, whether it's movement, whether it's sleep, whether it's eating or stress management, tying it to a specific event event might not happen every day, might not happen at the same time every day. So maybe an alarm doesn't work. But whether the event is getting up from bed, going to sleep, whether it's after dinner time, you're going for a walk around the block or doing some high knees in the house just to get some exercise in, all that can help you trigger these habits, or trigger these practices so they become habits without you having to really do a ton of extra work. Does that make sense, guys? And I see in the chat, Claire said, I didn't know that. Maybe that was, judging by the time, maybe that was in response to the leaving the bed open for sleep thing, or maybe melatonin.
Alcohol thing.
The alcohol, yes. Can you believe we have like a whole happy hour culture and nightcap culture around drinking in the evening when it's just gonna disrupt our sleep? But it's good to know, because then you can start making shifts if possible. Okay. All right. Lisa J says, yes, great reminders. Everyone, thank you for logging on. Really great to see all these new folks. Again, if you'd like to join our daily wellness text thread, you can text TEXT, text that word to our phone number 1-224-302-6224. We've opened up the registration for this month in honor of Black History Month. So if you use the discount code BHM, you will get in for free. It is usually $10 a month to get these weekly workshops and a daily text message lesson that covers the things that we just talked about today, and then much more. But again, your first month will be free if you use that BHM discount code. And if you forget, I think we mentioned it in the last newsletter, and you can always just feel free to text that number and ask me about it, or email. Want to make sure that you guys get as much support as possible. So I hope to see you all next week as well, since we're continuing this open period during Women's History Month in March. All right, take care, everybody. Happy, healthy living. I'm gonna
Thank
stop
you. Good night,
recording
everyone.
again.
Good night.
Guys.